The automobile became a national cause for the French. Dion negotiates with ministers, mayors, bank directors, mechanics, and poster printers. According to the will of the ACF, automobile races must become a matter of prestige for the Grande Nation. Across the world, everyone must proclaim France's technical supremacy. The automobile acquires a political aspect, much like satellites and moon rockets would 60 years later. In 1896, 1 year after the race that was so important for the automobile in France, another race is organized, larger, more beautiful, and covering a greater distance, Paris-Marseille-Paris, totaling 1,750 kilometers divided into 10 stages. It starts on September 24th and is scheduled to last until October 3rd. 52 vehicles are registered. However, on the morning of September 24th, only 31 cars show up. In total, there are 23 gasoline carriages by Panhard for the first time Delahaye, along with Peugeot, Daimler, and Benz, ready for departure. There are also 3 light voiturettes, built by Léon Bollée, one of Amédée Bollé's sons, and, for the first time, 5 gasoline tricycles by Dion Bouton. Dion himself, somewhat ironically, travels in one of the good old steam cars, with which he had lost the Paris-Bordeaux race in such a dramatic way. The race brings many unpleasant surprises. The weather is terrible with torrential rain. The racers, in their open cars, tremble with cold and curse themselves. Armand Peugeot goes ahead by train to buy dry clothes for his racers in Dijon. On the second day of the race, the storm turns into a hurricane. Fallen trees block the roads, which are covered with crushed stones washed away by the rain. Levassor is forced to saw through the trees using a handsaw he fortunately brought with him. Only the nobleman René de Kniff, a friend of Count Dion, traveling in a Panhard car, crosses the storm relatively dry. A flock of sheep blocks his path. Slowly, at a measured pace, the shepherd, wrapped in an old goatskin cloak, walks ahead. De Kniff jumps out of the car, does not haggle over the price, pays with shiny gold coins, and wraps himself in the rain-soaked garments, unknowingly creating the first fashion trend for motorists, which would endure. Fate marked this race for Émile Levassor. 45 kilometers from Avignon, a dog runs into the wheels of his car. Levassor tries to swerve. The car jolts. The right wheel sinks into the wet road, and the entire vehicle crashes into a tree. Levassor and his assistant are thrown far. They manage to resume their journey and, despite severe pain, reach Avignon, where Levassor is forced to check into a clinic. 7 months later, on April 14, 1897, he dies from the injuries. The first pioneer of automobile racing becomes its first victim. Madame Sarrazin Levassor is widowed for the second time. Dion also fails to finish. At an unguarded railway crossing, he narrowly escapes death. He continues to the next village before giving up. It is definitively his last race in a steam car. However, his gasoline tricycles perform remarkably well. In the final standings, 2 large Panhard cars take first place, but Dion's tricycles secure 3rd, 5th, and 9th places. The large Panhards average speeds of 25.0 and 24.2 kilometers per hour, while the much smaller Dion tricycles achieve 24.0 and 23.2 kilometers per hour. This amounts to a double triumph. The Dion tricycles are not only equipped with the first motor developed in France without foreign involvement, but, for the first time, also with tires from a certain Mr. Michelin. It is true that, during the Paris-Bordeaux-Paris race, a Peugeot car had already used these tires. However, the car performed poorly, requiring tire changes 22 times on the road, with 20 clamps needing to be screwed and unscrewed each time to hold the tire in place. Dion skillfully capitalizes on his success. Just a few days after the race, Paris is flooded with posters showing a beautiful woman dressed sumptuously and driven in a Dion car by a certain gentleman. The lady is the one driving the car, while her companion protects her from imaginary pursuers, who, despite their best efforts, cannot catch up with the kidnapped beauty on their horses and motorless bicycles. This kind of advertising appeals to Parisians. The new Dion tricycles become the talk of the town. It becomes challenging to produce enough to meet the demand. This success was also born of a playful experiment. Unable to let go of his childhood dream, Dion orders the construction of a miniature 100cc engine solely for play and experimentation. Since it is nearly impossible to adapt an incandescent ignition to such a tiny engine, as was common in four-stroke engines at the time, Dion builds an electric ignition system, equipped with a battery, a switch, and a spark plug, much like those used today. Next, he prepares a special gas mixture and fills the engine with it. As expected, the engine runs at a very high number of rotations, well above 900 RPM, which was previously considered the limit. Dion discusses this with his mechanic and partner, M. Bouton, who owns an old motorized boat with a Daimler engine that normally operates at 180 revolutions per minute, producing a lot of noise. The two partners fill the old engine with the special gas and install an electric ignition system. Dion observes that the engine runs much more smoothly, at 500 RPM, compared to the previous 150 RPM. He deduces that the engine is better lubricated at higher speeds, as the moving parts receive more oil, creating a better and more durable lubricating film. These two observations, electric ignition and improved lubrication, make it possible to build their Drerid motor, three-phase engine, with 120 cubic centimeters, 3/4 horsepower, and 1,500 revolutions per minute, which soon becomes famous. Jacques Rousseau mentions in his book L'Histoire mondiale de l'automobile no less than 52 motor manufacturing companies licensed by Dion to use their engines.